All right, thank you for joining us today for our MTI quarterly training. Today we are thrilled to have folks from the ARC Minnesota presenting on how peer and family mentorship can be an effective strategy for employment service providers. Before we begin, I have just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First of all, we are in webinar mode, and so that means that your microphone and your video are automatically muted. We do encourage and welcome you to take to the chat. Feel free to say hello, introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like, but also use the chat throughout today's presentation if you have any questions. We will be monitoring and happy to field those questions throughout. This webinar is being recorded and everyone will receive access to that recording. It will also be made available on the MTI website, so you will receive information about that. Our presentation slides will also be made available following today's training. You'll receive a follow-up email that will have the slides and any other materials that come up today, as well as a link to complete a very brief survey. It's 2 questions. We seek your input not only on today's training, but also on any topics that you would like to see covered in future trainings. Lastly, we also have closed captioning services available today, so feel free to access those on your Zoom screen. My name is Beth Weick, and I am a training associate with the Institute for Community Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, the Minnesota Transformation Initiative is made possible through a grant from the Minnesota Department of Human Services and in partnership with the Institute for Community Integration at the University of Minnesota, ICI at UMass Boston, Strengths at Work LLC, and the ARC Minnesota. This initiative is designed to help organizations move away from supporting employment that pays subminimum wage and to expand competitive integrated employment and community life engagement outcomes. Part of the MTI project includes these quarterly trainings where we focus on themes that are related to organizational transformation and best practices in employment and community services. This project has a landing page, and the PowerPoint that you will receive includes a hyperlink. And on that landing page, you will find more information about the project as well as resources. You can register for upcoming trainings as well as access the recordings of past trainings. MTI uses a research-based framework to support provider transformation. The graphic that you see here on the screen reflects a holistic and comprehensive approach to transformation. The 10 essential elements are focused on facilitating a holistic approach to provider growth and change, understanding that these elements all intersect and impact one another, and that real change and transformation requires a full and comprehensive approach. On the right side, we have the community life engagement guideposts, and this really gets into the service, design, and delivery of employment and day services. It outlines the 4 key considerations for building quality services that will produce quality outcomes. Today, as we mentioned, we are thrilled to welcome our MTI partners, the ARC Minnesota, as they share how peer and family mentorship, how that program can be used by providers to support the employment process. We Olivia Lape, who is the program manager for peer-to-peer mentor program, the regional capacity building manager, Courtney Christine, and we are excited to have peer-to-peer mentor, Dupree Edwards. And now I will hand it off to Olivia to get us started.
Thanks, Beth. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just start off with a basic introduction to the program. Like was mentioned, if at any point you have a question come up, feel free to put it in the chat and we can answer them as we go. So, next slide. So the purpose of the peer mentor program is really twofold. So one is to help individuals and their support networks, that includes providers, explore competitive integrated employment as well as other job options, right? So some people we provide information about competitive integrated employment, but we also help people think about what might be best for them. And sometimes that might look a little different at first, maybe volunteering or something like that. And the second purpose of the program is to advance the leadership of Minnesotans with disabilities around employment. So you'll see throughout the slide deck that there's lots of different ways that self-advocates like Dupree, who's a peer mentor, contribute to the program and help with trainings like these. And that's a really important and unique part of the program. And we really try to have the voices of our peer mentors and self-advocates lead the work that we do. Next slide. So, who do we work with? Really, anyone who's interested in employment and lives in Minnesota. So, we work with individuals. Someone does not have to be a part of a program or organization or get connected through a social worker, anything like that. Someone could just reach out to me by themselves. We also work with families and professionals. So you'll see later, Courtney will be talking about how we try and support families as they support their loved ones exploring employment or in competitive employment. We're also really working on getting connected more with schools and transition age students. So it's a natural time to connect with individuals because they're already thinking about employment options and what do I do next. They're not really set on a certain path yet. So it's really important and valuable, I think, for them to hear from peer mentors about what it's like to work in the community. We also work with organizations that still have 14C certificates, as well as organizations that have transitioned away from the practice. Next slide. So it's called the Peer-to-Peer Mentor Program. Who are peer mentors? What does that word mean? So it's pretty simple. Peer mentors are people with disabilities who have a job out in the community, earn minimum wage or higher, and are considered part of the ARC Minnesota's Peer-to-Peer Mentor Program. Next slide. And what does being a peer mentor look like? Next slide. So peer mentoring, there are a few key parts of it that I like to tell people who are interested in becoming a mentor. So one is that all of our peer mentors have the option to earn a stipend for their time. So any time spent on the program, whether that be training, meeting with an individual, presenting like this presentation, they're eligible to earn money for that work and for their expertise. It's also a very flexible commitment. So the program as a whole is really person-centered and individualized, and we want that to be true for the peer mentors as well. So we recognize, especially our peer mentors all have jobs in the community and busy lives. So we really want to make the program work for them and have them participate as they're able. And then we also provide ongoing training and support. So when someone's interested in becoming a peer mentor, I provide some initial training on what it's like to meet with someone, how to talk to someone about employment, some basic employment resources. And that's about a 2 to 3 hour initial training. And then the support afterwards is ongoing. So we meet together as a group, all of the peer mentors and I, at least once a month, and we work on materials, talk about upcoming presentations, and also just how they're doing and how peer mentoring is going. And then also peer mentors just reach out to me as needed if they need help or support with something. This is a statewide program, so anywhere someone is in the state of Minnesota, they can become a mentor, and we're especially looking for mentors in more rural areas and up north. A lot of our peer mentors right now are in the Twin Cities area and more down south, so we're always looking to add more mentors and have more representation of the state as a whole. Next slide. So the peer mentor's role is really unique. One of the main purposes of having peer mentors share about their employment story is just to share different employment options. So a lot of times someone might come to a presentation or meet with a peer mentor like Dupree, and Dupree's does public speaking and music and all sorts of different really creative things. And maybe before that meeting, they had never even thought about something in the arts as a possibility, right? Or they'd never seen someone with a disability doing that job. And all of a sudden they meet with Dupree and they go, okay, maybe I can do that. Or maybe they're not interested in music, but they might be interested in something else that's a little more not a traditional job. And all of a sudden, there's a whole new world of possibilities for them to explore as a job. Also, encouragement. So, looking for a job for anyone can be really intimidating and it can be really overwhelming, especially if you've never had a job, to think about what kind of job you might want, go through the interview process, all of those things. And so, peer mentors are really like cheerleaders. They're there to support the person as they go, help them with whatever they might need help with. I'll get more into the specifics of that a bit later. And really just be a support person for that person, someone who's there to listen. And peer mentors are not job coaches or social workers, but we do want all of our peer mentors to be trained on some basic resources to share with individuals because questions do come up a lot about things like transportation or benefits. And we want them to be able to direct them, point them in the right direction, and connect them with someone who can help them with those issues. Next slide. And then in terms again of if you are a mentor, what does that look like for you? Like I said, it's really flexible and we want it to be something that works for the peer mentor. So maybe that mentor meets with individuals one-on-one and that's what they really love and they're really great at. It might be presenting on different employment topics or coming to presentations like this to share their experience. A lot of peer mentors maybe don't like presenting or don't feel comfortable doing that yet. And so a lot of peer mentors right now help me make all of our presentations about employment topics and different materials, give their input on what they think is important to share. And like I said, just picking what fits them best and learning at their own pace. So someone might start off not feeling comfortable with presenting, and maybe a month or two in, after seeing someone else do it, they feel more confident, and all of a sudden they're taking on new roles and exploring new things. Next slide. All right, so we take a variety of different approaches to mentoring and how we connect with individuals and meet with people. Everyone learns in different ways, has different transportation options. All of those things factor into how we connect with people. So we want to have a lot of different approaches. So one of the ways that we meet with people is peer mentors have regular online meetings that they hold. So right now we're working through something called the Arc to Success Employment Toolkit, which is a really great resource and just has lots of different options or lots of different information on employment, things like disclosing your disability, how to interview for a job. And so this month, for instance, we're presenting on work-life balance. So they present on those and lead online meetings. We also do in-person meetings and meet with groups of people as well, depending on location and all of those things. We attend conferences, so the peer mentors, Dupree has been to a lot of conferences with me, and spread the message that way, especially so providers can hear about us. We also realize that not everyone has time to come to peer mentor meetings, or maybe they don't fit in their schedule. So we are working on creating different videos that go along with employment topics, like I mentioned. And we're also trying to make sure that all of our employment resources at the ARC and all of our videos are in multiple languages to make them more accessible. So all of our employment topic resources and supports are being translated or have been translated into Hmong, Somali, Spanish, and English. So lots of different options there. And then the more traditional, what you think of when you think of mentoring is just that one-on-one meeting with an individual, talking about their goals. Next slide. And I touched on this a bit in terms of what we present on, but we can pretty much present on anything employment related. A lot of the big topics that we get are things like, how do I apply for a job? How do I do that online? Or how do I go in person and ask for a application? Also, discussions like disclosing your disability that are really nuanced and don't have clear answers, but are important to discuss and have a safe space to explore and think about how you might want to disclose your disability or if you even want to do that. Also, how to access and use online employment tools. So all of our peer mentors, like I said, are trained on some basic resources, one of those being the Disability Hub. And then interviewing practice and preparation. It's always nice to have someone to practice interviewing with, and this topic comes up a lot. So we do a lot of interview prep and practice, thinking of how you might want to answer something, resume prep before you go into an interview. And like I said, we really tailor it to what the person needs. So maybe it's an employment topic that we haven't even thought of yet, but someone might bring it up to us and we can create a resource around it with the peer mentors. Next slide. And then what does meeting with a mentee one-on-one look like? So we have a lot of different options. You could meet with a mentee over the phone, online or in person. And then in terms of length, you could meet with someone maybe ongoing. So I have a peer mentor that meets with someone every week on Thursday. It could be one time. Maybe someone just needs help with interviewing, and then they go and interview the next day and get that job, and they don't want to meet with a peer mentor anymore. Totally fine. Also, they tend to be from 30 minutes to an hour, just depending on what the person's working on and what they have time for. And then the activity ranges, like I mentioned, searching for jobs is a big one, practicing interviewing. And then another really big part, especially of meeting with people one-on-one, is just listening to how things are going. Being someone there who's not necessarily a family member or not a support professional, but just a peer, right? Who understands what it's like, gets the struggles, can help you celebrate the wins, all of those things. So really just being there to listen is a huge part of being a peer mentor. Next slide. And then if someone is interested in becoming a mentor, how does that work? So it's pretty simple, but there are a few different steps. One is just to meet those mentor requirements of having a disability and working in the community, earning minimum wage or higher. And then if someone meets all of those requirements, I typically either email with them, talk with them over the phone, whatever is most accessible for them, and sort of discuss their job history, job journey, why they're interested in becoming a mentor, what they know about the program, those sorts of things, just to make sure they understand what the role is. And then if after I meet with someone and they're still interested, I invite them to one of those monthly mentor meetings where I meet with all of the mentors once a month and talk about everything, work on presentations. And this is a really nice thing to do because it allows the person to come and sort of get a feel for the program, as well as meeting the other mentors, which all of our peer mentors really enjoy meeting with one another, so that's a huge part of the program. And a lot of times, someone will come to a meeting and see what the other mentors are doing and how it works and get even more excited about participating. So I have them attend a meeting, and then if that goes well and they're still interested, I complete a few training sessions, like I mentioned earlier, just on those basic resources, how to talk with someone about employment. And then the person can just stay involved as they're able. So some peer mentors come to every monthly meeting. Most of them do. Some maybe they have to miss one because of work or a doctor's appointment or things like that. Totally understandable. It's a very flexible commitment. Thank you. And then on the flip side of this, if you are looking for a peer mentor or know someone who you think would benefit from having a peer mentor, a very similar process. You would reach out to me, the program manager, through email or phone, and all of those things are listed on the ARC's website as well as in this slide deck. And then you schedule a presentation like this one or schedule a time to meet with a peer mentor. And then when you meet with them, we'd usually do presentations like this for groups or that one-on-one mentoring support, like I mentioned earlier. Next slide. So I really like to emphasize to individuals who want a peer mentor that this is a free program. That question comes up a lot. So I really try and put that out there at the beginning. You don't need to pay for this. If you're interested in having a peer mentor, no matter how many times you meet with a peer mentor or how long, you'll never have to pay for that. Also, that it's a statewide program. So just because, say, you're up in Duluth, that doesn't mean you can't participate. You can always meet with a peer mentor, say online or over the phone, even if they're in a different city. Another really big part of meeting with a peer mentor that's different from a lot of other supports is the person can decide what they want to talk about. It's really person-centered and led by that individual. And so, like I said, maybe one day they do want to practice interviewing, and maybe the next time they spend most of the time just talking about their life and how it's going, and spend a bit more time just talking about things like work-life balance than a particular skill, and that's fine as well. Um, Also, support professionals, family, friends, anyone is welcome to come with an individual to peer mentoring. That comes up a lot, and most individuals really do prefer to have someone come along with them when they meet with a mentor, and that is definitely okay. And we've just had really positive experiences with that, and it allows sometimes two families to get a better idea about how to support that individual or what they're working on employment-wise. And it's a flexible commitment, like I've mentioned before. Next slide. So I've talked about how this program is pretty unique, and I think mentorship plays a really important and unique role. First of all, like I said, it's very tailored and person-centered just by nature, especially if you're meeting with someone one-on-one where you're just focusing on their goals. Um, Peer mentors also, it's very person-centered where they're sharing their own experience. They get to present what they would like to present on, those sorts of things. Peer mentoring also provides networking opportunities, right? So just like in any other scenario, the more people you know, the more connected you are, the more chances you have to hear about employment options or get connected to a certain job opening. It's really important too for community building. So a lot of individuals who reach out for peer mentoring or receive that or come to one of our online presentations are also interested in um, joining other self-advocacy groups and end up getting connected to the ARC's other services and self-advocate groups and really enjoy that and appreciate being connected with those resources that they didn't know about before a lot of the times. And then another really big one is just having a sense of empowerment and feeling like you can advocate for yourself. This really comes from our peer mentors who themselves are wonderful self-advocates and have a lot of experience doing this, especially job searching, working out in the community. It's something our peer mentors do a lot is advocate for themselves. And so through the example of a peer mentor and talking with them and peer mentors encouraging them to advocate for themselves, you can really see that skill and confidence develop. Next slide. So next, I just wanted to get into a few examples of individuals who were connected with a peer mentor and obtained employment afterwards. I think it just sort of puts it all together and gives some perspective. So like I mentioned, networking. So one of our peer mentors connected with a friend of theirs that they'd already known for a few years, and he knew that she was looking for employment and a job and thought she would be a wonderful fit for where he worked at Hy-Vee. So we helped her fill out her resume, get that interview at Hy-Vee, and now she works there and has been working there, I think, for about 2 years now. So that's a really important, especially if the peer mentor is meeting with an individual in their own city or area, because peer mentors have a really good idea about what sort of job openings there are, what sort of employers are friendly and work well with people with disabilities, honor accessibility needs, those sorts of things. The second scenario I wanted to bring up is just increased confidence and skills. And in particular, with this example, a peer mentor met with an individual, helped them find a job. That person who was mentored had that job for a few months and then ended up being let go from that job. It just didn't work out for a few reasons. And after he was let go from that job, he then independently job searched, filled out his own resume, all of those things, interviewed, and got a new job that he's been at for a while now. So he took those skills he learned with the peer mentor and that practice he got, and then went and applied that and was able to do it independently, which is really cool. Also, job-specific support. So I mentioned earlier, Dupree is an artist in a lot of ways. So Dupree's been connected with someone who is a DJ, and so he's able to provide that individual with really specific knowledge about being a DJ, public speaking, maybe what sort of equipment to buy or what places are great for hosting, that sort of information that that individual might not have access to otherwise. And then a really awesome, the last example is peer-to-peer mentor support. So I mentioned our peer mentors really enjoy meeting with one another and going to those monthly meetings. And one of our peer mentors was let go from her job this summer. And was having a bit of trouble finding a new job and feeling pretty discouraged, right? And this is someone who already was able to gain employment, do the interview process once before, worked at their job for a good while, and was still sort of having some difficulty and wanting some support. And they connected with Nate, who's a peer mentor, and Dupree. And they both helped her think about what sort of job options there were in her area, which is a bit more, I wouldn't say rural, but doesn't have as many options as, say, the Twin Cities. So helped her look at the businesses in her area, what she might want to do, helped her fill out an application, all of those sorts of things. And now she has a new job at Dollar Tree and loves it more than her old job even, and really credits the support from her fellow peer mentors as helping her to get that job. Next slide. So this is the fun part. I am going to turn it over in just a second to Dupree, who I've mentioned a few times in this presentation. He's been a really big part of the peer mentor program from the start. But it's really awesome and just important to hear from our peer mentors about their experience in their employment journeys. And I know Dupree is not shy, so if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But I'll pass it over to you, Dupree.
Thank you, Olivia. Um, yeah, I think the first time I joined the peer-to-peer mentor is when the MTI was in their, 6 months of their grant. And I got invited to speak about the peer-to-peer mentor just like we're doing now at a conference. And it's and that conference opened up a lot of doors for me. I think like MTI is probably the reason why I got the job at Institute of Community Integration. This program opened up a lot of doors for me on the inside and be able to advocate and things like that. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I'm glad they're entering their fourth year right now. And it's really good to be at the presentation so everybody can hear the best thing that they're doing, not only for, peer to peer, but also for you know, uh the providers, the day programs, the people that are transitioning, starting with school age stuff. So I just wanted to open up with that. But as we get into it, yeah, Olivia was telling a little bit about, my employment journey and how I, started the in the peer-to-peer mentor stuff. And um I think I bring a lot of different perspective from the other mentors. I chose, not to do piecework or supported life. I wanted to be more of a independent job and get a job right away. So, and then I growed into competitive integrated employment. So on this job, we're just talking about my current job right now, which is ICI, but I had four other jobs, three other jobs before I started peer-to-peer mentor. I was working at Upstream Arts as a teaching artist. I was working at Lunds and Byerly's as a courtesy clerk. And I usually talk about when I present with Olivia, um uh that I present with Olivia, I talk about, you know, at our presentation, we talk about the importance of mentorship, and then I give my perspective of my dream jobs and things like that. And I always start with the hair district because that was my first job coming out of transition school. And trust me, I've grown a lot in those areas, and really good. I mean, that I usually joke about in the presentations we do. I usually joke like that place treated me like a king, for real. I get metro drivers say, "Hey, how do you get to work with all those beautiful women and stuff like that?" But yeah, I think, as I'm telling my employment story, not just with the peer-to-peer mentor, but with other organizations and things, and you know, I feel like employment is my strongest story, because I've really been able to stay at jobs and not move to job to job. I really try to learn to gain skills. Even though I had my difficult times in those jobs, but it did help me, become the person I am today. Um, you know, and how I got into like self-advocacy was, I think it just came, naturally for that. Um, but I just want to tell a little bit about that. And then, this is kind of when we go back, we had like a little quote to tell, and it says, having a job gives me sense of belonging and pride in my community. Throughout my work, I get a chance to form meaningful relationships with people with or without disabilities, which add value in life to my job. I strongly believe that people with disabilities have a unique perspective and brings a lot of value to any workplace. I would say also, throughout my employment journey and how I became a peer-to-peer mentor, mostly throughout the program, I just been Olivia's sidekick of just continuing to grow the program. And, we got a lot of mentors now. We got a family advocate, family mentors now. And, I just really like the trajectory as we're going, and especially the toolkits, the presentations and stuff. So what I've tried to say is that I'm not involved as much as I've been before, but I do keep in touch with a lot of things. I just want to say one thing about the peer-to-peer mentor that we all know is that we have over 12 uh peer mentors right now, and representing most of this Twin Cities, but some in the South and things like that. So that really makes me proud of all the stuff and the traction that we kind of did before. Yeah, I think one thing that peer-to-peer mentor program helped me grow in is just to really understand, how to, keep a job and how to be able to grow in a job, or what to do to have a career advancement, or what's to do to, and I haven't really helped a lot of people, with jobs and stuff like that because I don't have a lot of things, but I do have like Olivia said, job specific stuff. They try to match stuff, and I thank Don Levin for matching me up with Ricky. He's been great and awesome, and um I meet with them every week. We talk about a lot of good things. And I've been practicing up. One thing that I've been really pushing into the pyramid is school transition age students. And I think one thing is that, for me being a transition plus and be able to grow, I just like to be able to add to my employment story there. And so yeah, I think one thing is the peer-to-peer mentor really um is really heading in the right direction, and I'm really glad to be a part of it. And so yeah, what I do right now currently, I am a lead state advisor on system change at the Institute of Community Integration. Um, but one thing that I also is going to be self-employed, and I have my business, uh, small business, and they provide with Composure and my business called the Do Bed Show Productions, and people can book me public speaking, uh, performing my music, you know, hosting a panel, doing a presentation, even if they want me to write a song or things like that. And so yeah, I just wanted to speak on that today, but um, I'm just gonna let Courtney just take over a little bit. But thank you for listening and appreciate all of you.
Thanks, Dupree. I
You're
did
welcome.
see in the chat that I wanted to read to you in case you didn't see it. Dupree, you are absolutely awesome. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Right. So my name's Courtney Christine. I work with the family side of mentoring. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because it's a little bit different than our peer mentoring as the parents or other family members, although it's vast majority is parents, are not the ones actually doing the job, right? They're supporting somebody, typically their child who's a teenager or adult, in looking for a job. We have a lot of folks who are in that transition where they're, maybe in high school or maybe they're in their 20s in a transition program, and are thinking about employment. And then, I mean, we have adults of all ages, who might be accessing a peer mentor or whose parent is coming to something. And it's an interesting sort of dynamic, where we're getting that parent perspective of, the barriers that are going on. It's like, oh, I see my kids struggling and I really want them to, find success in whatever they're doing, and working through those different things. So, if you could go to the next slide, Elizabeth. Thank you. We do similar formats in terms of the like types of engagement. So we do presentations that are specific to family perspective, like Zoom presentations, or panels with different parents, and we'll talk about different things. We just had a panel this last fall, with three parents whose children are at different stages of transition. It was all focused on like school and then moving to work after that. We have had specific presentations on like benefits, balancing work and benefits, MAEPD, those sorts of things. And some of them are combined. So, for instance, the MAEPD, one that I mentioned, medical assistance for employed people with disabilities. We had a parent there sharing perspectives and then also people with lived experience. So kind of both ends of that. It was nice to kind of hear both sides of parents helping their children apply for that particular type of medical assistance and how it worked with their job, and then self-advocate perspective as well. So there's times where we're completely separate, there's times where we're together. And then meetings. So we can do one-on-one meetings similar to peer mentoring, where if you're a parent who wants to just talk with another parent about, what happened, or what's happening with your child and in their job journey, or maybe if a parent is hesitant of, their child working, they can talk with another parent whose child has worked. And it all kind of centers around that parent perspective. Next slide. Hey,
Courtney, I'm
Courtney.
just gonna, oh,
Oh,
thank you.
Sure. Yep. I
You
was just
go.
going to jump in and say there's a question in the chat. It says, do you work with transition programs and employers and how to work together in supporting the young person in their employment?
Yeah, do you want to take that one or me, Olivia?
I can go.
Okay.
So we do try and work with both simultaneously. So we a lot of times, like for instance, we had a parent group this past year that was associated with a specific organization. So we worked with Rise. So it was all parents of individuals at Rise. And we met with them and they shared their concerns, asked questions, all the things Courtney mentioned. And in that way, it was really both working with parents as well as the organization and sort of trying to bridge that gap there. We're also working on connecting with another organization, same thing, where they're interested in helping individuals maybe explore competitive employment options. And they found maybe some families being a bit more hesitant, valid concerns, things like that. How do you manage benefits? And so working on creating a presentation where both people from that organization are present to answer and explain, as well as peer mentors and parents, and just really trying to bring everyone together so that they can support their loved one and really understand employment options, competitive employment, all of those things. Do you have anything to add, Courtney?
No, I would say just that it uh kind of depends on the situation, right? Like if there's a transition program that's gung ho, like ready to go and work with us, like we are more than happy to do that. We know that there's a lot of transition programs that, we haven't presented at or haven't talked with anybody yet. So if you in the chat are asking because you have a connection to a transition program that we might be able to connect with, please connect with us. And yes, we can touch on supported employment. It kind of can come up within those conversations. None of us are like employment supported employment providers. Like none of the peer mentors are that waiver paid service. But it can come up in conversation as another way. A lot of the peer mentors will ask like, "Oh, do you have a job coach?" When they're talking to somebody. So it comes up, but we're not, certified in that area. Anything else you'd say on supported employment, Olivia? All right. Keep asking questions in the chat. I'm gonna go to my next slide though of why parents. So sometimes I'll get this question like, why are, is part of the program focusing on parents versus just the, people with disabilities trying to look for a job? And a few different reasons for this. The first is that parents are often a primary advocate for their children, in particular when maybe the staff either aren't available, maybe they can't find someone to provide supported employment service or be a job coach, or maybe it didn't work out, not a good fit. Any of those sorts of things could happen, and there can just be consistent support. So there's a lot of changes that happen when someone turns 18. You were in the youth system and now you're switching to the adult system, especially if you're not going to a transition program. If you're, graduating at 18, like someone without disabilities who isn't going to that transition program, then the cutoff is, even more of a sort of jarring transition, and the parents can be consistent through that. They also have a unique understanding of barriers to their child working, so they've, been with them their whole life versus just temporarily. And sometimes that causes us to not see things clearly, and sometimes we have the bigger perspective. So I think it's important to have both of those things working together, or to have another parent talk and say, "Oh, did you think of this?" And they maybe haven't. The other thing is that parents may have their own barriers to talk through. We have a lot of parents in our support group that I'll talk about in a little bit that, have mentioned other things going on in their personal lives, like, going through a divorce, and how that's impacting things, and they're trying to figure out, the best ways to support their child with their ex-spouse and whether or not that spouse is also supporting, and if they are, is it consistent? And well, where's the person with the disability living? Is it, with one parent or the other or somewhere else? And then who's transporting them to work? Or are they, doing Uber or Lyft, or can they drive themselves? So there's just all these sort of layers of support that parents may not provide, and it can feel very trying to work through all of that. And giving extra support when you don't have as many professionals in your life to do that can feel very daunting if you're alone as a parent. So, and the other thing is, parents can just be easier to understand and relate to than professionals. I mean, that's a similar concept of the, self-advocate peer mentor program, where it's just hearing from somebody that's been in your shoes, and has worked through something similar, that similar lived experience is just so impactful. So, I will go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about our current parent group. We had a different one last year that was more general, and this year we're trying out one that's specific towards parents of teens and young adults. We meet once a month virtually and have all sorts of different topics, like transition programs, employment and daytime supports, government benefits and balancing those with work, guardianship and supported decision making, anything else related to transition and employment. I mean, there's so many things that come up. I was just mentioning that people were talking about divorces and how to support their child through that. So it's can kind of range just depending on what's going on in the parents' lives at that time. Last month we talked about resources, and what, is in people's areas. We're statewide, but there's some overlap of, a couple people living in a similar area or just statewide resources. We've talked a lot about, guardianship and supported decision making, and, whether or how you're supporting a child, talking with like their employer directly. Like, a job coach might usually be able to do that, talk to an employer directly. But if they don't have a job coach, is the parent, or is the employer going to have the parent's contact information if something happens or not, and how to have that discussion, whether or not they're a guardian, and how all that works. So there's so many layers when you start diving into things, and I'm just always surprised where the conversation flows and what's going on in parents' lives. I wanted to provide a few just examples, and I'm not going to give specific names or anything because I want, the confidentiality of the group to be intact. So I might change some specific details that could be identifying, but did want to share a few examples of some impactful moments. So the first one I wanted to share was there was a parent that was worried about their son losing their benefits. We were talking about medical assistance and Social Security specifically, because they were working and things were going well. They got a job. Their employer wanted to give them more hours. It was like, wait, but I don't want them to lose benefits. If I had to make too much money, I'm going to lose benefits. And so the other parents in the group shared a lot of ideas. I was kind of like ready with all my resources of, wait, have you heard about MAEPD? And then one of the parents mentioned that. So they mentioned talking to someone from Disability Hub, or figuring out how many hours the child could work without going over their limits, and then helping the child talk with their boss about about sticking to just that amount of hours. And just, having that conversation back and forth with the boss. And there were other suggestions too. It was just, suggestions flying in that realm of things because it's top of mind for so many families and was just so nice to kind of sit back and I would kind of link in a resource whenever one of the parents mentioned it. Like, yeah, that's a good one. So it's nice to see parents giving resources to each other that have been successful for them. Another example I wanted to give, and then I'll kind of wrap things up, just happened at our last meeting at the end of February. There was a parent sharing some really intense struggles that their child is having right now. The child's like in crisis, not taking medications, doesn't want help from mom, and is just in a really rough patch. And she said, I just want to talk to another parent who's been through this to know that I'm not alone and to find out how their child came out on the other side. And then immediately one of the other parents raised their hand and they're like, me, my son went through the same thing. And so they're connecting outside of the group individually to talk through that a little bit more. And it was a powerful moment of, finding exactly what she was looking for within this group of other parents. So I've got one more slide here, I think. Um, I want to end on a quote from our parent mentor and kind of wrap things up with that. One of our parent mentors is named Carmen. Carmen has done some really creative things to help her sons work through and towards their dream job. She's got multiple sons with disabilities, and she is a great example of a parent who dreams big right along with her children and then does what she can to make it happen, including like getting a brakeman's license with one of her sons who is really into trains. So Carmen said, I would tell other families if you can identify their dream, success will follow. And that's what I've got. There's everything. We got contact information for Olivia, and I'm not sure if you had anything else to wrap up with, Olivia.
Thanks, Courtney. That was a nice positive note to end on, so thanks for sharing that story. Um, I don't think I have anything else to share. I guess I will pass it back to Beth.
Thank you both, and thank you, Dupree. We do have a couple minutes here. If there's anyone that has a question, they are welcome to put that question in the chat, whether it's for Courtney or Olivia or Dupree. We'll take just a moment and kind of see if any questions come in the chat. And just to acknowledge that on these last couple of slides, you will be receiving the slide deck. And there is the contact information as well as the website for the ARC Minnesota so that you can learn more. Okay.
Olivia and Courtney, I have a question for you all. What are some of the ways that a person or family can use, like unique ways that a person or family can use a peer mentor that's less obvious or is currently being underutilized?
You're making me think.
Yeah,
Olivia, if you have
that
an
is a
answer,
really
feel free to
great
go first. I'm
question.
thinking.
Um, I mean, every person who comes to a peer mentor is really unique and has their own, um, dreams and goals and struggles. But I don't think we've had any particularly unique connections. I think the coolest connection, in my opinion, is just being able to connect Dupree with a fellow DJ, right? It's probably pretty hard to find a peer mentor that's a DJ. So they got connected with just the right person. But nothing else is coming to mind for me, but I'll have to keep thinking on that one because that's a good question.
Thank you.
One thing came to mind for me. We've had a few parents in our support group that have shared, there's just so much coming at them from the school district or from, whoever in their lives, and they just don't know which thing to actually pay attention to. And so some of the other parents, will say, oh, call this Ability Hub or whatever. And it, you'll hear either a text in the chat or one of the other parents say, "Oh, yeah, like the school district told me I should do that, but I don't know. It was on a list of, 10 other things and I just didn't know which one to do, but that sounds familiar. And now that you said it and said it was helpful, I'm actually going to call." So just having that validation or a little bit of narrowing down what's been useful to someone in a similar situation kind of helps direct. And, there's so many resources you could probably try any of them and, get a little bit in the right direction, but having that validation, I think, is important.
Thank you.
All right, I see no other questions in the chat. And so just to, again, you'll get these slides with this information. We included the website for MTI so you can learn about upcoming trainings as well as our next quarterly training that will happen in a couple of months. And there is a link. I'll include this in the follow-up email, but that is to complete the very brief survey that we're hoping you'll take a minute to do so. So again, on behalf of MTI, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I'd like to thank Olivia and Dupree and Courtney for sharing with us today. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day. Thank you.